Hey everybody, it is Chris, and earlier this week, Heroes of Faerun, the new Forgotten Realms supplement, came out for early access, and so I have my copy, and I've gone through it, and I want to start going over some of the aspects of the book. This is a pretty big book. If we consider the only other Forgotten Realms book we've had for 5th edition, it is the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, and the Sword Coast Adventures Guide was thin. There was very, very little in it. And when you consider that the Forgotten Realms is not really one campaign setting, it's like 100 different campaign settings mashed into one world. The Sword Coast represents one of those campaign settings. And, the Sword Coast is maybe 10% of Faerun, and Faerun is maybe 10% of the Forgotten Realms in its entirety. So the Forgotten Realms is massive, and if you look at previous editions, there are supplements for all kinds of different areas in the Forgotten Realms, and 5th edition just hasn't looked at them. But now we're starting to get some information about some other areas in the Forgotten Realms and how they've been updated and what things have stayed the same. I was very pleased to see some of my old favorites are still there. But what I want to do in my next number of videos is start going over the character options, because there's actually a lot of character options. We have new subclasses, we have new feats, we have new spells, we have new backgrounds, so I want to start going over that stuff, and there's a fair bit. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to squeeze in an extra video a week. So I'm hoping to get a video out on Wednesdays. I don't know if I'm going to get every Wednesday. It depends whether I have enough time or not, but hopefully next week we'll start seeing 3 videos a week as I work my way through this book. But what I wanted to start with are the subclasses, and I don't want to just go over what's in the subclasses. I think other channels have already covered that information. I want to go in a little more deeply and analyze the features and compare them to the subclasses for the same classes in the player's handbook, so we can see how balanced are these subclasses compared to the other subclasses in the player's handbook. And we're just going to start at the beginning with College of the Moon Bard. It's the first one listed in the book. And it says the College of the Moon Bard traces its origins to the ancient druidic circles of the Moonshae Isles. Now, the Moonshae Isles, if you are unaware, and you very well might be since it's not in the Sword Coast, are basically consider the British Isles if all the Celtic myth was true. The druids have great magic, and there's standing stones, and there's bards that go around and talk about the lore, and there's lots of fairies, all that kind of stuff. It says the ancient druidic circles trusted the first bards of this tradition with chronicling the stories of the islands and their people. Bards of this college draw from the Isles fey magic and the primal power of moonwells to bolster their allies, protect the natural world, and inspire their bardic works. So that's what they say about it thematically. I will tell you that mechanically, it's like if you took a bard and then you sprinkled a little bit of druid on there, and then you sprinkled a little bit of archfey warlock on there. That's mechanically how it kind of works out. And let's take a look at the features and see how they compare to the existing bards. So we're going to start at level 3, and what you see written in white is what's in the book. What's written in yellow are my notes. So I'm probably just going to read through the features, then I'll read through my notes. So we start with Moon's Inspiration, and by the way, we get 2 features at level 3, so this is the first one. The primal power and ever-changing power of the moon flows through you, granting you the following benefits. Inspired Eclipse. When you take a bonus action to give a creature a Bardic Inspiration die, you have the invisible condition and teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see as part of that bonus action. This invisibility lasts until the start of your next turn and ends early immediately after you make an attack roll, deal damage, or cast a spell. And then Lunar Vitality. Once per turn, when you restore hit points to a creature with a spell, you can expend a Bardic Inspiration die and increase the amount of hit points restored by a number equal to the roll of the Bardic Inspiration die. The creature's speed also increases by 10 feet until the end of its next turn. Now, when it comes to the subclasses in this book, we actually saw a playtest for them a long time ago, like near the beginning of the year. We saw an Unearthed Arcana for these subclasses. So I am going to compare what we see in the published works versus the playtest. I'm also going to compare it to other Bard subclasses in the Player's Handbook. So this feature replaces Moonshade Folktales from the Unearthed Arcana, which allowed you to spend a Bardic Inspiration die to increase magical healing with a spell, take the Disengage or Hide action as part of giving out Bardic Inspiration, or impose the Bardic die as a penalty on saving throw as a reaction. You took a magic action to switch which option you could use. So basically, you could do one of them, and then if you wanted to be able to do another one, then you had to use a magic action to switch so that now you can do the other feature, which meant in combat, you'd only ever do one of them, right? And then in between combats, you could switch it around. So this has buffed the 2 initial uses for the feature. It allows the bard to switch between uses without expending that magic action to switch, and teleport invisible is a lot better than taking a disengage or hide, and if you use the healing option, it also provides a movement increase. However, the saving throw penalty is removed, and let's just be honest, that was the best one. It was by far the best one. It was so good that I kind of figured during the playtest that no one would ever switch from that. They would just stick with that one and expand all their Bardic Inspiration dice on that. So that option is removed, so we have the other 2. And one of them got a huge buff, and one of them got a tiny buff. Inspired Eclipse is very good, as basically you can use your action as normal, cast your spell or whatever you want to do. Then with your bonus action, you're going to give out Bardic Inspiration and teleport and turn invisible into the start of your next turn. And that is very powerful. Lunar Vitality seems underwhelming by comparison. I mean, if you say Healing Word, for example, a 2d4 plus Charisma is probably healing 8 hit points. Adding a d6 on that is going to be 3 or 4 more on average, and that's less than a 50% increase to a Healing Word. It is a lower percentage increase if you apply it to something like a Cure Wounds. And I will note that if you use Lunar Vitality with an action healing spell, you could technically use both of these features on the same turn, but you're going to run out of your Bardic Inspiration very, very quickly. I'm also going to point out that at level 5, this feature is going to get a massive boost, as that's when the Bard gets Font of Inspiration, which allows the Bard to recover Bardic Inspiration on a short rest instead of having to wait for a long rest. This is going to allow the College of the Moon Bard to use Inspired Eclipse regularly in combat, and that is probably what I'd recommend. So if you're going to play a College of the Moon Bard and you want to use this feature, I recommend using Inspired Eclipse. You want to give out your Bardic Inspiration anyways. If we use Lunar Vitality, we're not providing Bardic Inspiration to anyone. We're just increasing a healing roll, and not by that much, and a bit of a speed increase. But with Inspired Eclipse, basically we're handing out Bardic Inspiration as per usual, and then we're getting this massive increase on it, where we're teleporting and turning invisible. And bards are not known for good defense. They have light armor training, no shield training. They have pretty so-so hit points. So you definitely want to have features that are going to give you a defensive boost, and Inspired Eclipse really does. I mean, once we have Font of Inspiration and we start increasing our Charisma, we can use this on most of our turns in combat, and we'll be invisible whenever it's not our turn, and teleporting around to safer places. That's really a nice boost to defense. And then we have another feature at level 3, and that is Primal Lore. It says you learn Druidic, the language, and 1 cantrip from the Druid spell list. It counts as a bard spell for you, but doesn't count against the number of cantrips you know. Whenever you gain a bard level, you can replace this cantrip with another cantrip of your choice from the Druid spell list. Additionally, choose one of the following skills: Animal Handling, Insight, Medicine, Nature, Perception, or Survival. You have proficiency in that skill. And there was the Primal Lorist in Unearthed Arcana, which was pretty much the same thing, except it didn't give you the ability to switch out the cantrip when you leveled up. So there is a slight benefit there in the published version. This is obviously the ribbon. at 3rd level, and it's a pretty good ribbon. There are going to be some combinations that are going to make use of the Thorn Whip cantrip if you want to choose that. This subclass in particular is going to get Moonbeam. Moonbeam is one of those spells that if you pull a creature into it, they take damage, so you could combine that with Thorn Whip. But if you don't want to worry about combinations, I would recommend pick up Guidance. Guidance is normally not available to bards. It's a good cantrip, and bards are a skill class. They get more skills than other classes. They get expertise. They get jack of all trades. So when it comes to skill checks, as a bard, you should expect to be making more of them than other party members. So Guidance is a nice little boost on that. So it just goes together well. I'll also mention that none of the skill options you can take here are dexterity or charisma based, which as a bard are probably your top 2 priorities for ability scores. So my general recommendation would be pick up Perception. Perception is one of those general skills that's always useful. I like to have it on any character I can, so getting it for free here is nice. So I looked at the other bard subclasses in the Player's Handbook at what they got at level 3, and I think College of the Moon actually compares very well, specifically Inspired Eclipse. That just stands out as a top tier option for Tier 3 Bard. The only other feature that I thought even compared to Inspired Eclipse from the Player's Handbook Bards was Martial Training for Valid Bards. That gives them shield training and medium armor training because, like I said, you have that improvement to defense, and that's so good on a Bard. So I would say the Valid Bard is in the same realm at level 3, and Lore, Dance, and Glamour I don't think measure up to the College of the Moon. But I will also mention, when it comes to Moon's Inspiration, these aren't equal choices. I would be using Inspired Eclipse all the time. I don't think I'd be using Lunar Vitality very much at all. Even if I'm doing healing, I probably don't want to use my Bardic Inspiration on that when it's not a huge benefit, and I could be using those Bardic Inspirations elsewhere to use Inspired Eclipse. And Primal Lore, I think, is a pretty solid ribbon. Then we get to level 6, and we have Blessing of Moonlight. It says you always have the Moonbeam spell prepared. This is not a spell normally available to bards. It's usually a druid spell. When you cast Moonbeam, you can modify the spell so that you glow faintly while the spell is active. While glowing, you shed dim light out to 5 feet. And that doesn't matter. It's just a thematic thing. And whenever a creature fails its saving throw against the effects of this Moonbeam, another creature of your choice that you can see within 60 feet of yourself regains 2d4 hit points, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we'll get into that. Once you use this feature to modify a casting of Moonbeam, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. And if you're unaware, Moonbeam is basically a space laser. It comes down in a big column, and you have this area, and you move it around and fry all the enemies in that area. And then if you can pull enemies into it or push them into it, they take damage as well. With the Unearthed Arcana version of this feature, which was called Blessing of the Moonwells, you could cast Moonbeam without expending a spell slot once per long rest. And then you got the benefits here of the 2d4 hit points of healing when you cast it that way. And you could restore your use of the feature by expending a spell slot of 3rd level or higher. So my first gut instinct, and I've already read reactions online just under the assumption that this ability was nerfed because it used to provide free casting and it doesn't anymore. The more I think about it, the more I think that not only was this not nerfed, it was buffed. Blessing of the Moonlight might initially strike you as a nerf to the playtest version, but the playtest version required that the enhanced Moonbeam, the one that did the healing, was always cast at 2nd level, because when you cast a spell without a spell slot, it's automatically cast at its lowest level. But here, you can enhance a Moonbeam cast with a higher level spell slot, and Moonbeam is a spell that upcasts very well. It does an additional d10 per spell slot level, and that's not like 1d10, that's a d10 every time you roll damage, which will be many, many times, potentially. It depends on the combat, but potentially many, many times. And you can now use this feature at a higher level without concentrating on a 2nd level spell. So if I'm a 10th level bard, I don't want to be doing necessarily a second level Moonbeam, but with the old College of the Moon, if I wanted to get the benefits, that's what I had to do. Now I could do a 5th level Moonbeam and do lots of damage with it and get the benefits. Now, this feature is going to get the best use when you have as many creatures as possible moving through the Moonbeam on your turn. So what you want is a whole bunch of creatures on the battle map. You move the space laser over as many of them as you can. And this allows you to force a lot of saving throws. So 2d4 doesn't sound like a lot, but it's going to become 4d4, 6d4, 8d4 with each additional failed saving throw, allowing for potentially significant healing on each of your turns. Also, keep in mind that if enemies are forced into the effect on someone else's turn, you also might get more healing from that as well. In the right fight, with the right party, where they're grappling creatures and pulling them into the Moonbeam or whatever, this could conceivably be 10d4, 14d4 healing every single round. Not promising that that's going to happen in your next combat with this character, but it is a potential if you have the right party and the right fight. That said, if we are comparing this to other Bard subclasses, so I went through, we are looking at a level where 6th level is just really, really good for Bard subclasses in the Player's Handbook. This is where Dance Bards get the party-wide initiative boost. This is where lower Bards get 2 additional spells from the Wizard, the Druid, or the Cleric spell lists. Glamour Bards get a repeatable bonus action command spell. And Valor Bards get their enhanced extra attack. These are like the standout features for all these subclasses. Getting Moonbeam is a really nice pickup, and the enhancement is pretty good, but it is only once per long rest. And as I look through those other subclasses, I'm not sure this feature is as good as any of them. I think it's good enough that it's going to feel impactful at 6th level. I don't think you'll feel disappointed when you use it, but it just so happens that the Bard subclasses in the Player's Handbook really get amazing features at level 6. Then we have to wait a whole long time, and we get eventually to level 14 in our final feature, which is Eventide Splendor, or Eventide Splendor. I'm not sure which way it's pronounced. You become suffused with the might of the moon, improving your moon's inspiration in the following ways. Shadow of the New Moon. When you use Inspired Eclipse, that's the great one that you teleport and turn invisible, the creature who received the Bardic Inspiration die can also have the invisible condition and immediately take a reaction to teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space it can see. The creature remains invisible until the start of its next turn. Now, that's not necessarily a round. It depends on the initiative order. They might go up next, in which case they're not invisible very long. But if they just went, and then you do the Bardic Inspiration on them, it'll be nearly a full round. And Vibrance of the Full Moon. When you use Lunar Vitality, you roll a d6 and use the number rolled in place of expending a Bardic Inspiration die. Or you can do that, but you will do that. Because, as I mentioned, Lunar Vitality probably isn't worth your Bardic Inspiration die, but you give it to me for free. Well, now every time I roll healing using a spell, I get an additional d6. So that's good. With the Unearthed Arcana version, which was called Bolstered Folktales, you could roll a d6 rather than expending a Bardic Inspiration die when you enhanced healing, or reduce the saving throw. So that really nice one that is gone now. And if you took the disengage or hide action, you could also teleport 30 feet. The funny thing is the increase to the disengage or hide action still didn't make it as good as the published version has at 3rd level. Now, Vibrance of the Full Moon allows you to add the d6 to any healing spell, and with the Unearthed Arcana version, you needed to have chosen that Bardic Inspiration option, which you probably weren't going to do unless maybe you weren't in combat. If you weren't in combat, then you could switch it, do the enhanced healing, and switch it back. But if you want to do healing in combat, you wouldn't have had selected it. So it is technically better than the Unearthed Arcana version. And Shadow of the New Moon is a good buff. The creature is invisible even without expending a reaction. They only need to expend their reaction if they want to do the teleport. And if you have an ally in trouble, basically you give them Bardic Inspiration. That's going to help on their saving throws. Then invisibility, that will help prevent them from being targeted. and a reaction teleport, which can help them get out of dangerous situations. That's a pretty potent 1-2-3 punch. And as strong as the level 6 features are for the player's handbook, the level 14 features aren't that great. As I went through those subclasses in the player's handbook, yeah, level 6 really stands out as awesome. Level 14, not so much. Valabards can take a bonus action attack when they cast a spell as an action, but if I'm a Valabard, I want to use my extra attack, right? My special extra attack. So I won't proc that most of the time. College of Lore can expand a Bardic Inspiration to improve their own skill checks, which is okay, I guess. Glamour Bards get a feature that can simulate kind of like a Sanctuary spell on themselves, but only against attack rolls. The best 14th level feature might be the Dance Bard, which does get an enhanced version of Evasion, which is good. I would rank this feature in a similar place to the Dance Bard, and it might even be a little bit better. Overall, I would say this subclass is very comparable to the Player's Handbook subclasses, but I don't think it's power creep. I don't think it's a case where it's better than those subclasses. I think level 3 it's a little bit better, but then at level 6, it's a little bit weaker, and then perhaps even behind the other subclasses. But at level 14, definitely catches up again. I think it ended up pretty balanced against them. My criticism of this subclass isn't the balance. I think the balance is actually really good. My criticism is that at level 3, we have two options. We have Inspired Eclipse and Lunar Vitality, and they just do not seem like equally beneficial options for my use of Bardic Inspiration. And until level 14, when Lunar Vitality is free, I don't imagine using it very often. That said, I think this is a decent subclass, and I would have no hesitation to play it for a more magically inclined bard specializing in magical space lasers racing through the battlefield. Well, I keep popping off Bardic Inspirations, and I'm only visible on my turn. Like I said, I think this is a pretty good subclass. I just happen to think that the Player's Handbook subclasses for Bard are also pretty good. To the design team, I have to say, pretty good balance here. If you're going to give us a feature like Moon's Inspiration, balance off those two options. All right? There's no point us having Lunar Vitality here when it's not worth our Bardic Inspiration die to do it. I mean, there might be a case once or twice where I do it just because I need that as much healing as possible, but it's probably not worth my Bardic Inspiration die when I have such an enhanced version of just handing out Bardic Inspiration through Inspired Eclipse. So that's my one criticism on it. Otherwise, I think this is a pretty good subclass, and I'm pretty happy with it. Gonna move on to the other subclasses, so I hope you will join me. Otherwise, until next time, I'm gonna sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.